Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions. The fact that you're listening is awesome, and of course, we'd love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Joining me today, we have Frank Pisani back again. How you doing, Frank?
Doing good.
Excellent. And Logan Wilkinson. How you doing, Logan?
Doing fantastic.
Wonderful. It's been a couple weeks since we sat down and recorded our Guardians thing, since we recorded that before my trip. But today we're going to be talking all about the Santa Claus 3, The Escape Clause. If you've been following our podcast for a number of years, you would know that the last couple of years we did the Santa Claus. The original Santa Claus was our That D Plus Show episode 49 back from December of 2020. And then we did the follow-up, the Santa Claus 2, as episode 101. I think this is like episode 154 maybe of this podcast. I don't know. I'd never keep good track of the episode numbers. I know we're up in the 150s though. So we're just kind of continuing that tradition. Next week we'll do Home Alone 3, kind of continuing
that's the one I'm excited about.
Home Alone runner of podcasts that we've done over the years. That's why we picked it. It is December, and these are this is wrapping up our Santa Claus trilogy. It is unlikely we will revisit the Santa Clauses next year, because I watched the first 20 minutes of the first episode. I was like, nope, don't want to do this. So, a little bit of the history lesson here. This one, the Santa Claus 3, was originally released November 3rd, 2006. That was a good 12 years after the original that had come out November 11th of 1994, and another 4 years after the Santa Claus 2, November 1st, 2002. Other releases around here, November of 2006, we had the ominously prescient Idiocracy that came out September 1st of that year. We had the duo of The Departed and the Dane Cook led comedy Employee of the Month on October 6th. The Prestige was Christopher Nolan's pre-Batman Begins there on October 20th. Alongside the Santa Claus 3, we had the original Borat film on November 3rd. Following up November 17th, just for Logan, we had Casino Royale.
And you love Casino Royale as well.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
But it's, you are our Bond aficionado. Alongside that, also Happy Feet released. We had The Holiday with Jack Black and Kate Winslet and others on December 8th. Dreamgirls, December 15th. The 2006 reboot of Rocky in Rocky Balboa on December 20th. And Night at the Museum, December 22nd. So,
technically, not to get into the weeds here, but Rocky Balboa
is not a reboot. It's a continuation.
Yeah, right.
Yes,
that's a really interesting list. Like that's like peak Logan watching everything come out in a movie theater like time period. Like I watched, I think every one of those movies except for maybe Employee of the Month and Dreamgirls, like in theater. Like that was like anything that was happening, I was watching. Because I mean, I would have been this is 2006, you said?
Yeah.
Yes, I'd have been 14 years old. Yeah, it was just like anything that's happened. That's what you do in high school. Just watch every kind of movie. So that's a nice little nostalgic blast. The past one.
Of those, the only one I would have watched was Casino Royale. I've seen The Holiday. I've seen Idiocracy.
Holiday's good.
But yeah, that's of those. Yeah, I've still never seen Night at the Museum. I've never seen. I know Dreamgirls, but
I feel like you'd like that.
Night at the Museum.
Oh yeah,
maybe.
I think you'd like Night at the Museum a lot too.
I like the first one. I never saw they did like a bunch of sequels, and I never saw those. But the first one was like a fun, movie. I might have saw that in the theater, honestly.
Yeah.
But going off of what Logan said too, I have seen Employee of the Month more than once. You're not missing anything.
Yeah, I remember the trailers for Employee of the Month, and this was, I was probably working at a Costco around that time, or I had Well, let's see. I worked at Sam's Club from 2002 to 2005, and then I started working at Costco a couple years later, so maybe 2007, 2008. So I might have been in between working at the big box store that Employee of the Month is very much set in. So I remember like seeing the trailers for it and was a Dane Cook fan at the time, but then just was like, no, I have no interest in actually seeing that movie.
Yep.
Anyway, this movie has a runtime of 1 hour and 34 minutes. And in the Disney live action timeline of things, it is sandwiched in between some Pirates of the Caribbean. We had Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest, came out July 7th of 2006. Then we had Invincible, which was the Mark Wahlberg as a football player, August 25th. Then we had Santa Claus 3 here, November 3rd. Following that, we had the Bridge to Terabithia, which is a movie that like I'm like, oh, I know the name, couldn't tell you a thing about it or who was in it until I looked it up for this and was like, oh, it's a pre-Hunger Games Josh Hutcherson. Cool.
Yeah, I knew the movie. I had never, because it obviously came out in the time where I'm watching everything, right? I never seen it, and I hadn't realized until like less than a month ago. It was like popping off on Twitter a little bit. And the movie's like real sad, apparently. I went ahead and like, it's like a nice, like heartwarming movie, but like also has like a very sad ending. Like what's the Macaulay Culkin movie where he gets killed by the bees? My
Girl, or is that a different one?
Yes, that's thank you. Yeah, thank you for the save, Frank. Yeah, like My Girl, where it's like a nice movie, and then he is killed by bees at the end of that movie.
When I was looking, I was like, what is this one about? I saw the poster first, and it is one of those posters that is like so like overly processed that I legitimately was like, is this an animated film? Is this like is this like Polar Express era CG? Because that's very much what the poster, at least in like an IMDb level like image, was showing me on Twitter, and then I like actually saw some stills. I was like, oh no, live action. All right.
Is Polar Express Disney or DreamWorks?
It's Disney. It's on
Disney.
I think it's on Disney Plus.
Have we ever done Polar Express on the show?
Nope.
Dude, I love Polar Express.
It's on the list of like we'll get to it eventually. I think.
The problem is that there's like 100 Disney movies that are set during Christmas. There's a backlog for sure.
Yeah. Let me double check.
Love Polar Express.
Because I definitely know the Jim Carrey Christmas Carol is one that like pops up all the time, in these, including in like the recommendations and stuff. Let me Polar. Oh, maybe not. Maybe it wasn't here. Polar Express. Yeah, definitely not on Disney Plus at least. So yeah, maybe it was Dream.
Breaking news.
2004. Polar Express. Warner Brothers. So it's probably
Warner
over on
Brothers.
HBO Max.
HBO Max before they throw it off.
Yeah. And then so Bridge to Terabithia came out February 16th, 2007. And then following that, we had Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End on May 25th of 2007.
We did Dead Man's Chest on this show,
we
right?
did, yeah. We've done that D Plus show of Dead Man's Chest. Only Dead Man's Chest of the Pirates movies.
That's a rad we did that.
We started with number 2.
I can't remember why we did that, but yeah. Dead Man's Chest is a really fun one. We should get back because there are a lot of Pirates of the Caribbean movies.
There are.
That'd be a fun one.
We could do a whole month on Pirates of the Caribbean movies, even skipping Dead Man's Chest.
Yeah, Dead Man's Chest is really fun too because like I remember as a kid I really liked it. Like it was like my second favorite one. And, like it's not as good as the first, but still like a ton of fun and way more like action-y kind of thing. And then we did that podcast for it. I'd never forget like sitting down to watch it with Shravya next to me, and like we watch a movie, kind of be like, all right, yeah, like it's okay, it's not great, it's okay, it's fine, kind of thing, but like not bad. And then like having to like pause it to go up to get something, and being like, oh my god, we're only halfway through this movie. Like it just only being like, this movie's so long. That movie drags.
It is long, it drags, and it is entirely just a advertisement for the third movie. Like
it is a weird thing that exists.
Absolutely a thing that ends with no real ending. It is just like, hey, come if you want to see how this story ends, come back for the next one.
Yeah.
It was the
Great
part 1, part
story,
2
though.
before
Right.
Harry Potter started doing part 1 and part 2.
It is one of my favorite things that I love that they do, where the scene of Jeffrey Rush coming down, right? Like they hadn't told the cast that was going to happen, so it was all like their genuine surprise reactions. Always fun.
Anyway, diving into the roll call, a lot of this is a carryover because a lot of the Santa Claus 2 team carried over here into the Santa Claus 3. We had Michael Lembeck as the director. He directed Santa Claus 2. He'd also directed a number of TV things like episodes of Mad About You and Friends. The writers, Ed Decter and John J. Strauss, worked on the screenplay for this. They had previously done There's Something About Mary, Santa Claus 2, and the Lizzie McGuire movie.
Also a good movie.
Hell yeah.
And then Leo Benvenuti and Steve Rudnick are credited as coming up with the characters from the original film, even though they didn't probably work directly on this one. They had previously worked on The Dennis Miller Show and Space Jam.
Nice.
Our cast, we have Tim Allen returning, of course, as Scott Calvin and Santa Claus. Although he's mostly Santa Claus in this one. Of course, from Home Improvement, Toy Story, Galaxy Quest, Last Man Standing, now the Santa Clauses. We have Elizabeth Mitchell returning as Carol. She had, prior to Santa Claus 2, she had done ER. This came out basically as her time on Lost would have been kicking off, because she joined Lost in that like third season, I think. And basically like this was a few months after that season's start. She would go on to be in shows like V and Revolution. Judge Reinhold as Neil, of course, from stuff like Fast Times at Ridgemont High and Beverly Hills Cop. Wendy Crewson returning as Laura from another Macaulay Culkin film there, The Good Son, as well as Air Force One.
Oh, that's right.
Eric Lloyd returning as Charlie and looking like he's in his like late 20s. He played young Kevin in The Wonder Years. Dunstan checks in, and he was Blanky in the Brave Little Toaster movies. He was also young Bruce in Batman.
That's crazy. That's what I was looking at. Yeah. That's a crazy. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Spencer Breslin returning as Curtis. He had been in The Kid, and then
Cat in the Hat.
also in The Cat in the Hat, Shaggy Dog, and he had been in Santa Claus 2. Lillian Mummy also returning as Lucy. She'd been in Santa Claus 2, as well as the Cheaper by the Dozen movies, Lilo and Stitch 2, and Lilo and Stitch the series, and she was Bubbles in Powerpuff Girls Z. And then I have him stricken out in the doc because David Krumholtz did not return as Bernard in this one, so sad face there.
I honestly miss him as like Bernard too. Like I don't know what like particularly to point to of like why that makes me upset, but I'm just like, man, I wish Bernard was in this movie.
We also have a lot of the legendary figures returning, including Peter Boyle as Father Time, known from stuff like Young Frankenstein and Everybody Loves Raymond. Is also, I believe, his final performance before he passed.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. Yeah.
Art LaFleur returning as the Tooth Fairy / Molinator. I did appreciate that they name dropped the Molinator for a little bit of continuity. He, of course, is Babe Ruth in The Sandlot, and he was in the film Man of the House. Aisha Tyler, returning as Mother Nature, has gone on to be in things like Archer, Criminal Minds, and the newer Whose Line Is It Anyway series. Kevin Pollak as Cupid, having been in A Few Good Men, Wayne's World 2, Grumpy Old Men, The Usual Suspects, That Thing You Do, and The Whole 9/10 Yards. And Michael Dorn returning as Sandman, or Sandy, probably best known to audiences as Worf from Star Trek The Next Generation. Our new characters, not a ton in this one, but we have Martin Short as Jack Frost, having come from the world of sketch comedy and stand-up comedy in things like SCTV and Saturday Night Live, not light. Of course, also in Three Amigos. He was Jiminy Glick for many, many years and was just nominated for a Golden Globe for Only Murders in the Building currently.
Which is great. It's a great show.
We have Anne Margaret as Sylvia Newman, Carol's mother and Santa's mother-in-law. Kind of a bombshell of the 60s, going back into things like State Fair, Bye Bye Birdie, Viva Las Vegas, in kind of the heyday of that era of like musical stuff. I think I saw something where she was like described as the female Elvis. She was also in Newsies and Grumpy Old Men.
Yeah, she is.
And Alan Arkin here as Bud Newman, the father-in-law. Kind of made his name in Wait Until Dark, and then Edward Scissorhands, Glengarry Glen Ross. He was an Academy Award winner for Little Miss Sunshine, basically shortly before this movie, and then would go on to be in Argo as well. And then a few little like before / on the cusp of famous.
Right, yeah.
We have Abigail Breslin, younger sister to Spencer Breslin, aka Curtis, which I did not know until looking this up. She plays Trish, the inquisitive elf at the beginning. She had just also kind of broken out in Little Miss Sunshine, but prior to that, she was also in Signs. We have, and then she would go on to be in stuff like Zombieland, August Osage County, and Zombieland Double Tap. Just pulled him in here because he was one of those like, where do I know this guy from? John Ross Bowie, who plays Rory, aka Scott's assistant in the like alternate like timeline that they go into, is probably best known to audiences as Bowie Kripke in The Big Bang Theory, who is probably best known for just his weird vocal intonations as an antagonist of like Sheldon and Leonard. And then a very young Cameron Monaghan that I did not catch until going through the IMDb credits a second time is Traffic Cop Number 1, that brings in Jack Frost at the end of the film. He was also Winthrop in the Matthew Broderick Music Man, which I watched a lot growing up, that TV movie. I think I have it on DVD as well. He's also in Shameless, but probably best known to audiences these days either as Jerome from Gotham, the Joker-esque character, or Cal Kestis in Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order and the upcoming Jedi Survivor game. So
the Abigail Breslin one is really weird because it was like, I don't know when they filmed this movie, but it was just like immediately I was like, that's Abigail Breslin, like, and then there's like ready for her to have a major role in the film, and then she just like is in 2 minutes of it basically at the very beginning, very end, and doesn't do anything really.
Yep.
And it's very bizarre, like, and the camera's like focused on her, like she is the main person of the kids who don't do anything, but it's still just like a kid who doesn't do anything. It's super jarring. Every time she popped up.
The extra jarring thing for me as I was pulling like the credits was like, oh, like Abigail Breslin's in this. That's neat because she's like one of the like first credited characters, because it's basically like here are the big names and then it's all in order of appearance. And so because she's has like one of the first lines of the movie, she's one of the first ones that pops up on the IMDb. And Cameron Monaghan down at the very bottom of that list. So that's why I almost missed him the first time. It was definitely I went in the same thing because I'd started building the doc before I watched it, and then I watched it. I was like, oh, she's barely in this. And also weirdly, like some of the trivia that I did not pull is like 5 other people who auditioned for the role of Trish, and I'm like, it's a nothing role. Why do we care? But it's like Emma Roberts and Christina Ricci, and I'm like, that seems like way too old for Christina Ricci to have been at that point in time, because that's only that's only 14 years ago. She would have been well past Addams Family and stuff at that point. So yeah. But yes, just much like we had I don't remember who it was in Santa Claus 2, but there was like another kind of before they were famous kind of thing. Yeah, a few of those. And again, like Abigail Breslin had just like made waves and was nominated for an Academy Award for Little Miss Sunshine. In between that movie coming out and the awards, this movie also comes out. So yeah, it was like must have been a weird year in her life. But then also realizing that she's the little girl in Signs too, I was like, oh yeah, she was just like one of those like really young stars, in the same way that like you had her brother being in The Kid and stuff like that. So some trivia here. This is the only Santa Claus movie where Santa's head elf, Bernard, doesn't make an appearance. David Krumholtz wasn't available since his numbers schedule conflicted with filming. Because of this, the script was written with the returning character Curtis having taken over as the head elf. Despite Bernard's non-appearance in the film, the novelization of the movie uses his character.
Yeah.
And then also I'll slide this one up just because it's on that topic. David Krumholtz was originally going to reprise his role as a cameo at the end of the movie, arresting Jack Frost and joining in the group hug. But and in the final cut, he had retired before the events of the film, but that scene got replaced by Jack Frost's redemption. So no Bernard in this one. This is another one where I'm like, all right, they're just scratching for or like just prying for things for IMDb trivia. But the answer to Mrs. Claus's math question at the beginning of the movie is 3 hours. An object moving in one direction at 20 miles an hour would take 3 hours to travel 60 miles, and the other object moving the opposite direction would at 50 miles would take 3 hours to travel 150 miles. 60 plus 150 equals 210. So there's your little math lesson for those of you joining that D Plus show, since we are, in the auspices a class. At one point, Jack Frost refers to Scott's mother-in-law, Anne Margaret, as "you divine little kitten." This is a wink and a nod to her role in Kitten with a Whip, and also the fact that he continues to pry her to sing leads back to stuff like Bye Bye Birdie and State Fair and the like. And her chart-topping, I guess she didn't top the charts, but she was like a Billboard 100 recording artist of the era. This is the only Santa Claus film where there isn't a gradual change between Santa Claus and Scott Calvin. The escape clause makes the change instantly, and when Jack Frost goes back in time and steals the Santa coat. So that's what I got for trivia. So what did everybody think? I think we were talking before we started recording. This is my first time watching this one. This is Logan's first time watching this one. Frank, you'd seen it before, so we'll start with you. What did you think kind of like revisiting this? Do you have like, maybe if not fond memories, like did like how did this fit compared to maybe what you remembered?
Yeah, because this one's the interesting one because like I grew up watching the other two a lot, and then I remember this one like coming out, and like I didn't see it right when it came out. I saw it on like ABC Family probably like years later.
Sure, definitely.
During their like Christmas
25 Days of
block.
Christmas. Right, yeah.
Yeah, that was a staple growing up. Like
Absolutely.
and so like I think I caught it on that like years later, and I still like I like this movie, but I also like I don't think it's as good as the other ones. Like I think if you were like ranking the three, this is like the worst one, but I don't think it's bad. I just like it just doesn't really hit the same for me. And like I remember I kind of feel the same way I do about it now that I did then, where like I remember liking it. It's just like even like I kind of mentioned before we started recording too, is like I don't remember like anything from this movie other than that fact that like Martin Short is the bad guy and that he plays Jack Frost. And then like there's like a couple funny moments and a couple funny jokes, and one thing I do appreciate about it too is the fact that like they do have like a weird continuity in this world. Like they do have this all the same characters and all the same people keep coming back, and like they follow all the same things they've like set up or said before, which is like something they didn't have to do. They could have just done whatever, and I think people would have been okay with it. So I think it's funny that they actually did like sit down and kind of pay attention to some of these things. And there's something I appreciate about it too is and you even kind of mentioned is like, so this movie came out 12 years after the first one, and it takes place literally 12 years later. Like, and I was like, wow, they literally are like following it like as if he has literally been doing this for like each year since then. Yeah. And then it's like they do some like fun stuff like that.
Yeah, one of the trivia bits I didn't pull is that there is like and I guess it wasn't even in like trivia, but it was in like goofs or whatever in that section of IMDb. Is in the original Santa Claus, the body of Santa sticks around long enough for Scott to pry and find the business card, and obviously in this retelling of it, body just disappears immediately, so you don't have that like little moment. So they did like tweak it a little bit from the original, but yeah, it was interesting to like, oh, we're just like reusing the old footage in that like Back to the Future 1 or Back to the Future 2 style way and stuff like that. Obviously we started before we started recording, we talked a little bit about like the Back to the Future 2 / It's a Wonderful Life vibes of that like alternate future / alternate present kind of storyline with the Jack Frost stuff there. What did you think, Logan?
Yeah, I was ready for the movie to be bad, right? I had never seen Santa Claus 3. But as someone who really loves the first Santa Claus, like I think a lot of people do, right? It's kind of a holiday classic. And then I think liked but noted how much of a drop down Santa Claus 2 is from that. I was ready for this one to be not good, right? Like a comedy sequels 10 or more years after the original are typically not known for their quality, right? And so I think that actually sort of helped me a little bit, right? Because I was braced for it to be like really bad. Like not even like not good, just like actually really terrible and bad. And I think it's like totally fine, right? Like I think it is not terrible. There are definitely things I don't like the ending. But particularly like the first like 40 minutes of that movie, like I think it's sort of fun to just see Scott and everyone else just like in the North Pole doing stuff, and you know, Martin Short being Martin Short, right? And so like causing problems and just kind of being an asshole, because that's like Martin Short's whole persona usually for his roles. And yeah, I thought that was really fun. The like Back to the Future, It's a Wonderful Life vibes didn't land as much for me, I think. But I liked a lot of what they were doing beforehand. Like it's a weird movie because it almost feels more like a like Disney Plus or Disney Channel original movie kind of vibe and like quality to it than certainly than the first Santa Claus movie, which is like a film very much. And this one's sort of strange where it's like, I don't know, like aside from Martin Short and Tim Allen, like the rest of the cast isn't really doing much. It's just sort of like two guys just kind of acting around for like 30 minutes for 90 minutes. But like that sort of gives it this weird charm too. Like, yeah, like I think it's a charming, fun, goofy, silly movie. Like, is it great? Definitely not. But it's also not bad. And I'm definitely pleasantly surprised with Santa Claus 3, I would say.
Yeah, I'm largely in that boat too. I came in with very low expectations, and like,
Yeah.
I mean, it met those low expectations, but it wasn't like terrible.
Right.
And very much in the same vein, like I was watching it and like just all of the stuff happening at the North Pole, I was like, yeah, this feels like a cheaper, like we're just
Right.
going to keep everything pretty much in like one or two locations kind of thing. It very much felt like a Disney Channel original movie kind of vibe to it. And I think, but there at the same time, there were a few moments that like worked for me. Martin Short typically is one of those performers that I don't necessarily vibe with. I
agree.
I've not been a huge fan of his humor, and I think probably my most like regular exposure to him was as like Jiminy Glick, kind of in that like Comedy Central era that I largely grew up in. And so like he is very hit or miss with me. And for a lot of this movie, he's doing just Martin Short's shtick.
Right.
But I did love he hammers a sign up and he's like, haha, it's done. And then it just falls and breaks apart. And then he's like telling people, I was like, all right, that one got a good chuckle out of me. But yeah, a lot of it, there were multiple times in this movie where I like got distracted and started like looking at Twitter, and then I was like, oh crap, I'm going to be podcasting about this. I need to like rewind it a minute and a half and like figure out what I just wasn't paying attention to, what I just missed. And like in every one of those instances, it was just Martin Short like messing with stuff in the factory
around, right,
for
yeah.
a good 2 minutes, and like it's him blowing on cappuccino machines and breaking like just stuff. And so it was just like it was that, and then the chaos aftermath. And like, okay, yeah, you did the same bit a good dozen times. You didn't need to do them that much except to pad out the movie. So yeah, I like those were my bigger issues. And I think I would have enjoyed, I think they missed the balance of the It's a Wonderful Life-ness. Like we spend so much of the beginning of the movie setting up the like conflict of Scott versus his mother and father-in-law and stuff like that. And whereas what really works in It's a Wonderful Life is that all of the lead up to George Bailey like threatening or trying to kill himself or whatever, and going into that like, here's how life would be without you, is we get to see like the impact that he has for the first chunk of that movie. And this is really more like, all right, the first act and a half of this movie is Santa versus his mother and father-in-law and with a baby on the way. And then we do a complete different tangent into a different movie for like 15 minutes, and then it all gets resolved way too quickly, and then we get this weird little ending where they warm hug turns
Magic
Martin
hugs.
Short
Oh my
into
God.
into a
Oh
like
my God.
into his like Ned whatever character kind of thing, just without the cowlick. So I think like they didn't have like a script. They didn't have enough of a script for any one of those movies, so they just kind of took like 2 to 3 of them and kind of squished them together in a way that was like, this doesn't really work, and is really relying on you to enjoy Martin Short or not.
Yeah. I think that because I'm chomping at the bit for it, I want to talk about the ending. Yeah, I mean the ending's awful, right? Like it's definitely really stupid, but like especially because like it's a cute idea for Scott to be like, oh, like you've got like, magic hugs kind of thing. That's like a cute enough idea. And I like that, like, it's something for him and Lucy to have some sort of connection over, because obviously she's not his daughter, right? They're not related in that way. But they still have this kind of familial bond to him. I like all that. I like the idea that he brings her snow globes every year. That's cute as well. But the fact that she literally is apparently magical and her magic ability is hugs that unfreeze Jack Frost's heart is just stupid, right? And it goes back to me, like, even just hearing the like trivia, like, oh yeah, they were supposed to have Bernard there and he was going to arrest him, and that was going to be like the fun cameo. It's like, yeah, that makes sense. That is an actual ending, right? And it felt like they couldn't get Bernard to show up for that even. They were just like, well, we're shooting the movie right now, so how can we make this work, really? And they just went with like the first thing that came in their heads, right? And like that is
it's almost like that ending was a rewrite, and so so Martin Short was like, I'm not gonna get back in that wig and makeup for it, so let's just do this instead.
Right? Yeah, and like it's so strange too, because like again, I like this movie well enough, but it like will do weird things where for no reason at all stuff just happens, and then it like doesn't bother to put in the effort to like explain it, which is also part of what I mean by like it's a Disney Channel original movie. Like you're there along for the ride or you're not, right? But like the entire thing of like the Hall of Snow Globes is insane. It's an insane idea. Like it makes no sense. And like to me, like Frank was talking about like the continuity between the movies. That's something where it's like that is such an absurd. Like what are you talking about? And also, not to get too into like the minutia of legendary Santa Claus figures, like legal clauses, but like the escape clause is an incredibly stupid idea. Like the fact totally. Like that's how that works. Like that's a bonkers idea. Like why would like when I first heard that mentioned, my thinking was, oh, it's gonna be something that like will make him resign and then someone new can take over. I didn't think it'd wipe out all of the years he was Santa and drop it off again. That's a crazy escape clause that because factor into the contract of being Santa. Like, what are we talking about here?
If you could just rewrite time like that, why don't they do that when he falls off the roof and dies? So he doesn't fall off the roof.
It's crazy. Like and like the idea that like it can also not be like a genuine like statement, right? Like everyone who says I don't want to be Santa anymore in this movie is basically tricked into doing so, but it works just the same. And there's no sort of like repercussion about that. One of the guys is really like the Martin Short in particular was just like, what was happening here? Like that's not what he meant at all in this, right? And it's just such a weird thing to bake into the contract between Santa Claus. Like I would love to know the issue that arose where like they had to be like, you know what, we're going to put this clause into the contract of being Santa and just run with it and it'll be fine.
I mean, it was very much like they came up with the subtitle of the the escape clause, and was like, all right, let's figure out what that actually is, and then they didn't come up with a good idea. It like as soon as the pen got introduced, I was like, oh, that's how they're going to do it. And I didn't expect them to do it in the very next scene to be like, oh, that's how they just got Martin Short to record his thing. So that's where I say like all of that was like done at such a rushed pace that I was like, okay, that's wild. My thing with the ending, I also agree, very stupid. But I will also say, like, because what I was expecting and what I think I would have been a little bit more forgiving on would have been, okay, Jack Frost has frozen the parents. It's been set up that she's got magical hugs that warm people up. So she'll be able to thaw out her parents.
Yeah.
Fine. Whatever, still stupid,
Sure.
but at least it's
Right.
like, okay, it's like she's inheriting some kind of like North Pole magic in it, fine. Or maybe Santa imbues her with some magic or something like that. But yeah, it turning into a, well, no, you have to thaw Jack Frost's heart, which will then in turn thaw them out. I was like, okay, well, this is dumb, and just made even dumber by the like sculptures of those performers that didn't look anything like them, and then like the melting
When they froze
like,
too, it was real rough. That like
Yeah.
freezing effect CGI.
yeah, that is another thing that speaks to like that, and the Hall of Snow Globes was those were the like, oh, this is did not have any kind of budget.
This is a Disney Channel movie, right?
At the same time, like, go back and rewatch the first ones. They didn't have great CG either. Like, you go and look at like Santa coming into chimneys and stuff. They still look pretty stupid, like he does when he comes in this giant one of his own face in this movie. But yeah, it was still like this is not. I mean, this is late '90s, early 2000s CG still. We haven't reached the like pinnacle era of like CG superfests of superhero movies and all that stuff.
I did like a shout out to the face of Santa Claus in his own house, the fireplace. That was kind of an absurd one, but like it is weird because the Hall of Snow Globes was like, I don't even know what the right word for it is, but like the image, the scene of like Lucy just like clearly not touching and like wiping away the snow globes as they're coming at her in the room was just like, oh yeah, that one's rough. That is such a like real rough one, right?
Lucy very clearly was just told to like given no direction because she's just looking like at the same place, like up. Basically, she's like looking 30 degrees up as she's walking forward the entire time. So it's like they didn't say, okay, like imagine that there's like snow globes around you and something, and like look at those and like interact with them. They just told her look up and we'll put stuff in post.
Point, right? And like wipe it away, right? It's I also love the idea that like Martin Short like somehow knew that this was going to be a like, secret passage thing, and you just stand in the exact right spot as they did. Like all the elements of that are also a great classic, like
I mean, the
Disney movie.
The justification I saw for that at least was like he was like spying and following them. So even though his view of like the pattern was blocked, he saw where the wall was turning. So yeah, he probably just immediately went in and was like, all right, I'm just going to stand here and wait for, I've seen Indiana Jones in the Last Crusade. I'm going to just wait for this to turn back around. Cause like as soon as it turns, I'm like, all right, he's going to be standing there. And yep, there he was. Lots of dumb stuff there. Oh, also there was way too much comet farting in that, like in the reindeer stuff. And I was like,
right.
That's a thing they introduced in the other movies that they felt the need to bring back. That one scene of the movie is for like the 3-year-olds that come see this movie. How about you, Frank? Any favorite moments or things you want to kind of harp on?
I totally agree with what you guys are saying about the escape clause, like the clause, because that's one of the things I think is like clever about the other two movies. Is like the first one is like, this is the Santa Claus, and now you are Santa. And then the second one, it's somebody I joked about on when we did the episode too. It's like somebody was like, Mrs. Claus, he needs to get married. Like, and they were like, we got a sequel. Like, and then in this one, I feel like it was totally just like, it's a reach, like at no point does that even like make somewhat sense. And then the way they try to execute on it is just super weird.
It's a terrible clause to have for Santa Claus.
And then especially when you go into the fact of like, I understand he's magic, but it's like, okay, now we're just rewriting time. Like,
right. And like the element of that too is that like the obvious extreme is like, yeah, he's been Santa Claus for 12 years. It's not crazy, but like, what if he was Santa Claus for like 100 years? Like they have no sort of timeline of like how long somebody can be Santa Claus for, right? He's basically like an immortal legendary figure. So like, sure, like I'm Santa Claus for 100 years. Great. We're going to wipe out all of that. Like there are definitely some negative effects that I feel like the Council of Legendary Figures would have, some issues with, but they're just, fine with it.
Yeah. It's
And,
it's definitely a like break glass in case of emergency kind of thing. But even then it's like, yeah, wait, like why isn't the escape clause just, hey, I'm resigning and don't have to die to do it. I don't have to fall off a house to do it.
Because we're having, council members meetings for Jack Frost put in like cardboard cutouts of him, right? And he's getting booted from the council for that. But let alone Santa has the power to rewrite time.
Yeah.
I did like one bit. It's kind of a weird thing, but it is kind of what made me laugh but when they're pretending it is Canada and she's walking through the Christmas trees, there's the signs that are like Canadian Christmas trees. And then it's like the next sign is like from Canada. And then the third sign is like where you are right now.
Yeah. It's a lot of that whole stuff was just like, all right, it's another thing that like leads to the cheap nature of it, of just like, okay, like they didn't go anywhere else. They just kind of kept the thing at the North Pole and threw new signs on, threw new costumes. Also, shout out to the elves that looked like they were just straight up in like old timey jail clothing with like the black and white stripes. I was like, wow, is this like a commentary on like prison labor? But yeah, like and all of that of just being like the parents-in-law being that stupid that they don't know that Canada is not actually just filled with children. A lot of that was like, they did a much better job of like keeping the secret from things in the first two movies.
Oh yeah, for sure in that. But it did lead to a really fun exchange of like, Scott being like, well, have you ever been to Canada? We've been to Rochester. Well, that's not Canada, as a reason to believe that Canadian is just filled with small elf children. I did like that setup.
Yeah. Well, also, like when he was saying that, I'm like, wait, Alan Arkin, like your accent sounds very New York. I don't know where you're actually from, but like the fact that you're just like saying you've been to Rochester once, I'm like, all right, did you just pick up all of your dialect from them? Anyway.
I also like the scene of directly after we have Jack Frost and Scott's like mom-in-law like singing and talking about Jack Frost and the song, and it's all lovely and nice. And then the fire breaks out, and without missing a beat, already with it on his back, the father-in-law comes running in with a fire extinguisher strapped to him, right? Like, he wasn't alerted to this, just would have presumably just been having it already on him just for a nice little test run, and then saw a fire and was able to use it. Like, it was such a jar, like he just came out of nowhere with it ready to go. There's no setup of him being alarmed. I did enjoy that. Also, the fact that the operating room has a giant hole in it and they don't really explain why it's like destroyed at all.
Yeah, that was one, like, because it doesn't in the beginning. And
no, it doesn't. It's perfectly fine.
The headcanon that I had was, well, they knew the parents-in-law were coming who are taller people, so they needed to create headroom. But yeah, the fact that they like it's just gone and they don't ever like refer to it, or they don't have a line or a scene establishing that, it is just like, all right, there probably was something there and it probably just didn't make the ultimate cut of the movie.
Right.
Because there were a lot of those. I think there probably was a scene where Alan Arkin was getting was getting some kind of like tour from the fire brigade or something like that, and then runs in. But yeah, like even that speaks to like that was just the run of, okay, Jack Frost is like breaking a thing after a thing after a thing after a thing. And even though he was on like a one strike and you're out kind of policy, is just getting away with all this scot-free stuff. It's just like, all right, I don't. And then Santa Frost just having a straight up like New York, North Pole number. And I was like, all right, yep, this is just Martin Short being Martin Short, doing his Martin Shorty thing.
Again, not to get too into the weeds of like the Council of Legendary Figures inner workings, but like their thinking doesn't really seem to make any sense, right? Because again, their whole thing at the beginning of the movie is they're going to kick him off of the council for putting those cardboard cutouts out and try to take Santa's spotlight. And then you cut to the middle of the movie, he's out here making it an amusement park, giving away the secret about the North Pole, and there's no sort of Council of Identity Figures issues with this stuff. Like, it's very weird what they do and don't think are good and bad things.
Yeah, I mean, he's not taking away Santa's spotlight in that point because he is Santa now.
Sure, but
which
there's
is also a weird thing
other
of like
issue about like not revealing your identity seems to be like such a big thing, and then it's like I'm Santa Claus.
Yeah. The broader thing there, I would say, is like the legendary, like the Council of Legendary Figures, not having any questions about. Wait, this other legendary figure, Jack Frost, just also happened to be around to become Santa.
Right.
Yeah.
Suspicious. Something.
Yeah. Straight up, and he actively murders a guy, or like leads to the guy's death because he like calls out to him in that sequence of like, "Hey, you!" that leads the original Santa to fall off the roof.
He also would have had to create the snow in the first place too. Mm-hmm. So it's like he set the whole trap.
That's
where
true.
He just waited.
That's true, actually, Frank. That's a fun. That's a weird. Yeah.
Maybe the original, like that's how they could have really Back to the Future toed it, is if like he
just
had been there the whole time trying to kill Santa, and then but Scott Callan
really cool.
Got to the body before he did.
I like that as my new headcanon. I like that a lot, Frank. That's a great him just being there the whole time.
Yeah. Any other favorite moments there, Frank?
No, I don't think so. One thing, if we're like kind of calling out certain things we had issues with or nitpicking, I do feel like the whole ending is rushed, like you guys mentioned, but I do feel like they're way too accepting the fact that he is Santa Claus, like immediately. Mm-hmm. Like there's no, obviously the facts are there. They're there. They can see it, but I feel like that's such a wild thing, right? And they're so immediately just like, yeah, no, he is, and that's amazing, and I'm the father of Christmas or whatever, and it's just like. Okay, like they just like 180 on that, like immediately.
Also, shout out to the incredibly wild and weird subtext of like them just being swingers, and like the mom making eyes at the Easter Bunny, and the dad making eyes at Mother Nature.
The Easter Bunny one in particular is one that is just super. I did like,
especially in the like with seeing the like the bloopers in the end credits of like, oh, clearly like he was doing a bit with her, but what we end up getting in the movie is just like him kind of making eyes at her. Yeah. Also shout out to the fact that they didn't bother recording a second rushing Mrs. Claus to the hospital sequence. So the second one that happened, the first one, the false alarm happens at the beginning of the movie, and then when she's really giving birth, it's just the exact same sequence sped up.
Yeah, I forgot about that. That's a really good catch.
Yeah.
I don't know if I felt like it was supposed to be a moment, but like it didn't have any impact on me when they were like, and this is the baby, Buddy Claus. And I was like, is Buddy Claus an established character name in the Santa Claus like canon? And I was like, they gave it such a weird dramatic pause, and I was like, it's just Buddy Claus. I don't know what that means. So that was also like a weird beat to end the movie on.
It was weird, especially because like of the 20 minutes I've watched of the Santa Clauses, I was like, wait, I don't remember him being named Buddy. And yeah, like the son grown up is Cal in the Santa Clauses, and apparently they've included in the series that his full name is Buddy Calvin Claus.
Yeah, they didn't even commit to the show.
He goes by his middle name Cal. Because it's like he's being named after Bud, the father-in-law, but yeah, it's like it's weird. That's a weird thing. Maybe they were trying to fight off the popularity of Buddy the elf.
See, because that's what immediately comes to mind.
Yeah,
it's strange too. Not to pick on them for picking their, but like also it's like a weird name to name it after your father-in-law, who like until 10 minutes ago hated you. Mm-hmm. Is definitely like a move to earn brownie points, I guess, but like is a weird choice otherwise. It is very Deathly Hallows. I named him after the bravest man I ever knew, Severus Snape, and it's like, damn, you knew a lot of other people, Harry, that were also pretty brave, probably more than Snape. It's a weird choice. Vibes to me.
Yeah. Speaking of Harry Potter, when they did the Hall of Mirrors thing, I definitely was like, oh, they were trying to turn it into like the headmaster's room of Hogwarts of like
Ooh,
it's
yeah.
every past
That's a good one.
headmaster that's in here. It's every past Santa that's there is represented in here. It's still very stupid and
Yeah.
completely out of nowhere just for a MacGuffin.
Right.
But yeah, it was like
Also, yeah, an insane idea. Like also, again, goes back to my point of like there weren't that many snow globes. So again, how long are Santa Claus is lasting for is another point I had. But yeah, also like snow globes, I'm sure might be an old invention, but are they like 1,000 years old invention? Like how long have you been having like recorded Santa Claus stuff? Like that is just like a weird idea. And it's everything about the snow globes thing. It just doesn't make in the escape clause doesn't make any sense to me. It never will. It's just such a weird MacGuffin.
Or the fact that the red deer machine is the exact same machine and the same sequence to open that secret hatch in both universes.
Right.
Like the fact that Buddy, like especially the fact that like Jack Frost knew to expect Scott to be showing up 12 years after he took over. Didn't bother like figuring his way around that kind of stuff. It's like seems like you could have done a lot more to prevent that. But
It's
hey, at least we've got the Deus
yeah.
Ex Lucy that is also here with Neil.
Right. That is a good point. I didn't even think about that, Trevor. That's a really good point. He made no sort of preventative measures around preventing Scott. He could have obviously killed Scott. He's Jack Frost. Boom, ice in the road, you get a car accident. Boom, we're done with this, right? But like
That'd be a really dark movie, but yes.
But like he made no effort to prevent the thing he knew was going to happen from happening when he knew it was going to happen. It's like such a weird choice on his planet. He flew too close to the sun, and that was his mistake.
Yeah. Any final thoughts before we wrap up here? All right.
It's a fun movie. I enjoyed it.
It's definitely I've had more fun picking it apart with you guys probably than I did watching it. But yeah, it wasn't terrible. It's definitely one.
It is not the worst movie that we've watched on Disney Plus.
No, we're
Definitely
close.
not.
And hey, we have Home Alone 3 next week, so
Home Alone 3 I think will be a fun. I think it'll be like a fun Rocky Horror one to chat about afterwards. That's what I'm expecting.
All right. Then let's go ahead and give it a report card grade where we grade from A+ to F. Frank, what do you want to give the Santa Claus 3: The Escape Clause?
I think I would give it like a C, maybe, because it's not bad in many ways, and even though it's like I guess we kind of talked about, even it's definitely like worse than the other ones, but it's also not good or great in like many ways. And the kind of I think Logan nailed it too when he's like, it's fine, and you're like, yeah, like that's the whole movie. You're like, it's fine, like it could have been way worse, but instead it's like it's just. I even like the second one way more than this. So it's just like it's just a weird kind of middle of the road kind of movie.
Yeah. How about you, Logan?
I think he's spot on, right? I don't think this movie is bad, right? It is definitely not great. I think it is like to me like the definition of this is like a 6 out of 10, right? It's like it's okay. It's totally fine. It's got moments that I do think are fun and funny and goofy and silly, and I like the first part of it probably the most. I think it's strongest in terms of like landing the most jokes. And despite who Tim Allen might have kind of slowly turned into over the years post this movie, Tim Allen's funny, right? Like he's a funny dude, and especially like this era of Tim Allen still. And it is weirdly cool, like Frank said, that like it is just like the entire cast because it's the same Charlie from the first movie to the second one to the third, and that's a cool idea. And the same like wife and the ex-wife and all that kind of stuff, like they just carrying over. And yeah, I think that's a ton of fun, right? Like, we've watched really bad movies on this show, and this is not one of them. And so it is, I think, a C.
On that, one of the things you touched on, like I felt like this was kind of a Tim Allen phoning it in. Like he'd been making Toy Story money for as long as he had at this point, that like he didn't need to do this one, and
10 years.
And I felt like in part didn't really show up for this one. So it that's I think another like piece that like definitely weakens this one compared to the other two. Yeah, he's still not like alt-right, super right-wing Tim Allen yet, but yeah, he's just like
The whole movie's weird too. On like that note, Trevor, too, like because I was just checking, like it came out so many years after the second one. Like it is weird that they even made it at all in some way. I mean, I guess it made a profit and made money, and so that's ultimately, I guess, what Disney cared about. But like, it is a weird thing because like I don't know how much of a clamor there was for a Santa Claus 3 after the second one had came out, and like you said, Charlie is like 25 in this movie now, and they mostly don't do anything with him because he's old. They just kind of like have him there in the back.
they write him off to go to skiing with a snowboarding
Right.
with a girlfriend or something.
Right. They very quickly just get him out the front door. But like, yeah, it is definitely a weird movie, like that it exists at all, because I can't, like, after the first Santa Claus movie, I absolutely believe there was like a demand for a second one. But even that was an 8-year gap between films. And this is another 4 years after the second one. It's just like, I don't know. Did we need another Santa Claus after Santa Claus 2? Because Frank likes Santa Claus 2 a lot of times. Like, I think Santa Claus 2 is like good. It's fine. But I didn't need more of this story. And so it is weird that it even exists. It's also weird that 14, 15 years later, we get a Disney Plus limited series about this as well.
Yeah.
I'm not going to deny that as well. I don't know how much of the Santa Claus, mythology I need featuring Scout Calvin, but we're definitely getting it, and it got like a second season renewal as well. I saw.
That's wild.
But like, I mean, apparently and I love the original Santa Claus, but I did not realize there was this like fervent of a fan base around wanting more and more new Santa Claus stories.
Yeah, I mean it's nostalgia. It's people cashing in on nostalgia. I imagine a lot of the people who watch this don't really revisit the Santa Claus 2 or 3. They probably are just like, they really like the Santa Claus 1.
The first one's great. The first one's great, to be fair, right?
It's the best one by like a mile.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I will say, I looked it up, just kind of the financials as we were talking about it, and the movie had an estimated budget of $12 million and brought in worldwide gross of $112 million around that time.
Right.
So it made plenty of money for Disney,
Right.
and as we've touched on a few times, they made it so cheap that like they didn't need to turn a huge profit on it compared to the other ones.
Right.
So yeah, it probably was just we can throw something out there so
we're
that,
gonna give you $5
so
million
that Disney
to
has
make the movie
something
Tim Allen. Right, exactly.
in the holiday slot this year,
Right.
and can try and cash in on it. Whereas like now, they're not making these kinds of movies because they're throwing out Black Panthers, or they were throwing out Star Wars every other holiday and stuff like that. So those were their big like Christmas releases that were making them millions upon millions upon millions of dollars. They don't need to throw $12 million towards something like this.
I would love to do a larger, I don't even know where, like, I would love to do a larger conversation at one point in time about like just the evolution of Disney itself, right? Because like that's the thing, like, not to be, the old man on the front porch, but like, this isn't that long ago, and it's a completely different Disney than what exists today. Like, it's not that long ago where like Disney was putting out Santa Claus 3s for like its big winter tentpole movie, right? Or like the Bridge to Terabithia, that kind of stuff, right? Like, it's not that long ago where this was just a totally different studio before it bought everything. And like that evolution is really, really interesting, right? Because like, especially like this decade in particular, right? Because the Disney like Renaissance era has ended on the animation side. They haven't bought Pixar yet, I think, or they're right around that time. So like their animated films are like not amazing necessarily. They're all like good. And then
they bought Pixar earlier this year.
So yeah, exactly. So like right
in early
now.
2006. But even before they bought Pixar outright, they had been the exclusive distributor of the Pixar movies. So like they were still making bank off of Pixar. That was just kind of like a finalizing the deal kind of thing.
Right. But like the Disney animated movies proper, like were just like fine, right? And the live action stuff, they basically had like Pirates of the Caribbean, and that was it. And like this decade. And so like it's really interesting that like this was probably the last like fallow decade in some ways Disney had in like the last like 30 years, because obviously the 90s were huge, and then 2010s onwards have been massive. And so like it's sort of an interesting era of Disney. Even like actually the more I think about this, even like the 2000 to 2010 range is interesting because you're also kind of seeing the collapse of like the Disney Channel original movie kind of era in that period as well. So like it's just sort of this weird kind of barren low point for Disney in the last like 30 years. And it's sort of interesting to see how it evolved from there.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like the Bob Iger, like acquiring everything and becoming everything on a much grander scale. But I would also say, I mean, like in tandem with that, we saw that kind of happening across the industry of like these kinds of like C tier movies don't get made anymore because if it, like this is the kind that might get made because it has name value and name recognition to do a sequel, to do these like legacy kind of sequel things. But like, yeah, the you know, I mean, we've touched on this before in the past, but like the era of like the original Santa Claus and like Elf are like the last real like original like big movies that would go on to become like holiday classics, and those are 20 30 years old at this point, because there isn't a market that is kind of creating that, or if there is, it's, you know, like, I mean, I would argue, or Ben Bellevue would certainly argue that Klaus, the Netflix animated film from a couple years ago, is, you know, trying to be a new entry into that, but even that is like, well, it was Netflix, so it never got any kind of like theatrical release, and it's Netflix, so it's just kind of always there, and they don't get like a renewed push or anything. It's not right. It's not something that's going to be part of like a 25 Days of Christmas thing, exactly. Right? Exactly. Which is like, how, which is like that's such an interesting. Again, I would love to have a larger conversation around this, but like the impact of syndication is huge on these things, right? And like reruns, right? Because like that's the thing. Like most of the holiday classics that people think of, most weren't classics when they first came out. Like even It's a Wonderful Life, going that far back, wasn't, It's a Wonderful Life so, famously was a bomb until it started becoming like a TMC. But even like A Christmas Story, right? Like it took a few years of that being on syndication, and then TBS, you know, got the rights to it, and we're just going to air it 24 hours a day for the entire Christmas day, and so you don't have any other option. And like that's what part of it made it like a classic, right? It's like, it is so interesting, like how big of a role those things played in terms of making those movies, or National Lampoon's Christmas, right? Like all these things, the classics we think of, took time to get there, right? And Klaus or any other streaming thing obviously just doesn't have that same sort of route to go to. Or they're just doing like the same kind of thing, like Spirited, that's the Will Ferrell and Ryan Reynolds movie that is out now on like Apple Plus, I think. I think so, yeah. Like even that is just a Christmas Carol again. So, sure, yeah. Muppets Christmas Carol for Life. That's what I was literally just thinking it. Which and to their credit, obviously we've already done Muppet Christmas Carol, but they did recently. Do it again. I'll have to go back and watch it now. They've re-edited it, so they've put the like cut song back into the movie, and so you can watch it. Like the default one you're going to watch is still like the original that has that song pulled out, but you can go into the special features now and watch the full movie with the song put in, as opposed to what we did back when we watched that one for this show, where we watch it, then go watch the special feature of that deleted song, and then go watch the rest of the movie. Now you can do it all in one because they've restored it to its glory. And that one, shout out to that just celebrated 30 years, its 30th anniversary. So, extra credit, other suggestions. If you do like the Santa Claus 3, you can go watch The Santa Clauses. You can watch The Santa Claus, Santa Claus 2, Home Alone, A Christmas Carol with Jim Carrey, Noel, Godmothered, or Prep and Landing. And I think this was the exact same list as last year, but with the Santa Claus 2 and 3 swapped out. And because obviously we didn't have the Santa Clauses last year, it bumped Home Alone 2 off of that list. So, boo.
Yeah, that's a shame.
Extra Home Alone 2 is great. Anybody watching anything?
Yeah, I love that. That's my favorite one.
There you go. Anybody watching anything else on Disney Plus? Frank, have you been getting into Andor?
Nah, you might do.
I watched the first 2 episodes, and I still need to get back to it and finish it. The first 2 episodes were great so far, and I think like I'm really excited about like how high budget it is too, and like seeing when I scrolled through and I'm like, oh, this is 12 episodes and they're all an hour. Like that's way different than like any of the other shows. And even it just feels like it feels like a movie almost, like it actually has like the budget behind it. So I'm like excited to get back and watch more. And since our last recording too, I've finished Miss Marvel.
Okay.
Ooh.
You want to talk about Miss
Yeah,
Marvel?
exciting.
Logan will gladly talk about Miss Marvel for a little bit.
Absolutely. I love Miss Marvel.
What'd you
It
think?
was really good. Yeah, it was really good. I really liked it. I liked it more than I even thought I would, because I know like when it came out, a lot of the reaction I saw online, at least, was like people not really liking it, and then some people
Who
really
didn't like Miss
loving it.
Marvel? You're following the wrong people online.
Well, that's not the people I follow. It's just the general, like, people getting uppity about dumb stuff. Like, so it's like, but yeah, like I saw a lot of people like that. And then some of the people I know were like really into it. And after watching it, especially, like, it kind of hooked me early in, where I'm like, this is a really cool show. Like, with like the story it's telling, and like the characters that are in it, especially some of these characters you don't really get to see often in like a lot of media. And like, it was just there's a lot of cool stuff it does, and I really liked the style behind it. And then the only thing I kind of felt like is like it has the same problem that I think a lot of these shows kind of run into, where it feels kind of rushed at the end, where I feel like they were like setting up and doing a lot, and then the last episode's like, well, we got to wrap all this up like right now. And that's what I kind of hit. That's how it kind of felt. But that also left me excited for like more Miss Marvel in the Marvels.
Yeah. Shout out to somebody I saw since we recorded the Miss Marvel episode, and I probably saw it just a week or so back, but somebody has gone through and basically like mapped out the amount of time that different characters have screen time across the MCU. And I want to shout out that they identified that Bruno from Miss Marvel has more screen time across just Miss Marvel than Samuel L. Jackson does in all of his appearances as Nick Fury. So I thought like
Perfect.
that was like
I
one
love
of the
that.
big like takeaways that people were like posting online was that
Bruno's great. We love Bruno.
Bruno is just has been in the MCU more than Nick Fury. Since Nick Fury just pretty much always pops up for about 5 minutes and his bounces.
Miss Marvel's great. I love Miss Marvel. I'm just bummed that we won't get a second season for basically forever, because they're going to come after the movie.
Yeah.
I think it might be my favorite MCU thing that came out this year. Like definitely more than Thor: Love and Thunder. Whatever MCU shows were before that this year didn't hook me as much.
You had Moon
And
Knight.
then- Moon Knight
I
was
think,
nothing for
like
me.
the tail end of What If, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
What If was
then
bad.
I like She-Hulk a lot, but Miss Marvel was going to be better. And then did we ever do a Black Panther 2 spoiler cast? Did we have that conversation?
I mean, Cameron and I did a spoiler cast on that Nerdy Site show. It hasn't come to D Plus yet, so we haven't done it on that D Plus show. That'll probably be in the new year.
I got a conversation around that. But like Black Panther 2, I think is like good, but not like amazing. It didn't click with me as much as the first one did. So yeah, I think it might be my favorite MCU thing this year. Miss Marvel's great. I love it.
Cool.
I'm basically just rewatching all of Andor before That Nerdy Side podcast this week, where we talk about Andor.
Yeah, I'll have to start revisiting it myself.
It's still fantastic. Spoiler alert.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No surprise there. I think. Yeah. Other than that, I think I've mostly just been like catching up on a couple podcasts or just playing video games and stuff since getting back. So, but hey,
say,
like, I mean, I was also in Disney last week, so that was my other like that. I wasn't watching stuff on Disney Plus because I was there.
You were there. I will say, Frank, I'll be super curious to hear your thoughts on Andor after watching episode 3, because I think that is such a like launching pad moment for the rest of what that show is going to be.
Yeah, because I was liking what I saw already, and I definitely want to watch more. But it definitely, like, I don't know exactly the words to put it, but it's like it is kind of like slow, I guess, or like
they're setting a lot up in those first two episodes that really starts taking off after that with episode 3.
Yeah, I'll say what I've said elsewhere before, but I think my only real gripe with the series as a whole is that it is 12 episodes instead of, I think, like, and we watched the first 3 episodes because they all got released at the same time, but it's basically like the first 3 episodes are an arc and are a story. And then like episodes 4 through 6 are another one. Then 7 through 10 are like, could be basically a third movie. And then 11 and 12 are basically like a wrap up kind of / denouement. So like I would have sooner seen it as 4 short films or 4, I mean, in some cases, full length films, basically the length of this movie or others. And so the fact that it was like broken out as episodes sometimes made it like, okay, that wasn't the most natural end point, but it is like the first 2 episodes in particular are doing a lot of setup that is going to pay off in episode 3
really well,
because episode 3 is basically the conclusion of that story that you've seen set up so far.
1, 2, and 3 in particular, more than I think any other of the episodes, are basically just like one pilot of that show, right? And you're basically just not watching the end of the pilot. But yeah, like episode 3, for what it's worth, is probably one of my favorite episodes of the whole season. It's great.
Yeah. So
do you think binging it now that the whole thing is out might fix a little bit of that? Because like you can just kind of roll from one into the other.
Yeah, definitely. That's what Cameron did when he and I did the our like Andor season 1 thing. He had watched the first 3 episodes back when me, Logan, and him did the first episode, like the first That D Plus show on it, and then he just never got around to watching it again in the week to week. And so when it was coming up and like, hey, we're gonna do the Andor wrap up here after like that was the week after Thanksgiving or whatever, he basically sat down on Monday and watched episodes 4 through 12 pretty much all in one sitting. And
I liked the weekly breakup
so
for what it's worth, but yeah, it's definitely different viewing styles for different people, right?
Yeah.
So whatever works for you.
Yeah. Anyway,
Santa Claus 3.
That is going to do it for this episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you guys for joining me to talk about the Santa Claus 3 and these other fun things. You can follow Frank at Irrelevant Jokes. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Frank?
Yeah, give a shout out to our latest episode of That Nerdy Site Show, where it was you, me, and Cam just kind of talking about God of War and some of the other games that I've been playing.
Cool. Was that this last episode?
I think that was the last. By the time this comes out, it might be the Andor one that you.
Yeah,
we talked about the World Cup and Disney.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Okay,
yeah,
sorry.
It was that the one. Yeah, that the one you're talking about was 2 weeks ago. Yes,
time's a flat circle. Don't worry.
Certainly, yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, go check out That Nerdy Site Show indeed, and yeah, that one in particular, because that was you coming back on to that podcast for the first time in forever, which was lovely to have you. You can follow Logan at Lefty Logie or Loggy, Loggy. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Logan?
I would give a shout out to all of the amazing Let's Plays going live Tuesday and Thursday from one Trevor Starkey. Go check him out. They're very good, very talented. I will also give Trevor a second shout out. He gets 2 shout outs today. Look at him, lucky boy, for his continuing Twitter thread of all of the little Lego figurine pieces that he's building. That he's kind of updated through. I mean, I feel like it's been like a couple weeks now of that.
Yeah. We're on day 15.
Yeah, there you go. Go check that out as well, because that's always very fun to see his kind of updates there as well.
Yeah, it's that one's tricky because sometimes Twitter will just not want to upload the post. So I basically have to like cancel it and try again, 30 minutes or an hour or 2 hours later. So
Twitter's a working platform. We all know it. It's okay, guys.
Yeah, there you go. But yes, you can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. In addition to shouting out all those things, I will echo the this week's That Nerdy Site Show was Cameron and Logan discussing a lot of World Cup stuff, and then me sharing my recent Disney trip. So if you are so inclined, you can go check that out. I got to go into Walt Disney's apartment. That was really
super cool.
That's awesome.
Super cool.
I didn't even know that was a thing that
I know that's
was
my
there
favorite.
or that
no
you
one
could
knew there was
do.
a thing. Yeah, except for Trevor.
Yeah, I knew it was a thing that existed. I did not know it was a thing that you could do until a couple months ago when I saw basically a blog post about like, hey, here's a tour I went on. And so I don't think it's been a long running thing that you can do, but it is a thing you can do now, certainly. So yeah, you can go take a tour. You can take Walt's Main Street Story Tour, basically get a tour of Main Street at Disneyland, and then it will culminate with going into Walt's apartment over top the fire station there in Main Street. So cool little unique thing to do if you are a diehard Disney fan like I am. And yes, you can check out the Let's Plays from this week, which were I sat down with Vampire Survivors, which people have been gushing out about all year, as well as my first hour of Crisis Core Reunion. You can go check that out. And Skyrim will be back next week for more Let's Plays in that front. So go check out all that fun stuff on youtube.com/thatnerdysite. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please rate, review, subscribe, like the podcast, share it with your friends, all that fun stuff. Thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other. Class dismissed.